Welcome to the Pint Glass Football Podcast.
What's up, PGF Nation? We are back. Brian Callahan fired by the Titans. James Franklin fired at Penn State. Is Indiana a national championship contender? Chiefs make a statement. So do the Falcons. We've got upsets. We've got big wins. We've got a lot to get to across the NFL and college football this week. But once again, I'm your host, Brad Fowler. Joining me as always, my co-host, Alex Higdon. Alex, what is going on?
Hey, man, you saw what it was tonight on Monday night as we're recording this after both games. We saw what it was on Saturday, and we saw what it was Sunday night.
Yeah, crazy weekend of football. So many good games. Let's jump into it. Like you said, Monday Night Football just wrapped. That's when we go to the air right after Monday Night Football because we like to get those games in here for you guys. So let's start with that first game. Atlanta, kind of a shocking upset over the Bills. They were a pretty big favorite in this one. Look, my big takeaway here, this is kind of just big picture, Alex. I think it's time for the Bills to move on from Sean McDermott. I really do. Look, it really hit me watching this game. This defense is bad again. And it has been for multiple seasons now. They're ranked 23rd in defense according to PFF right now. You can't be a bottom 10 defense again this year like they were last year. That's his side of the ball. You can't be bad on your side of the ball. And it just feels like this team, once again, is getting carried by Josh Allen. And in a game like tonight where Atlanta's defense was really good, they got a lot of pressure on Allen, he can't always carry this team. So I look at this and I'm thinking, look, this team, as good as they are, they're going to be in the playoffs. They're going to probably win, a lot of games this year, and I get all that. But when is it just not enough? Because you have this unbelievable quarterback in the middle of his prime, and it kind of feels like it's getting wasted here with Sean McDermott. Am I wrong?
Well, I'm not sure if you're wrong, but perhaps I understand, and there's another team that they play at the beginning of the season we could have that same conversation about, but we'll save that for another pod. But I could see the perspective on saying he's in the middle of their prime. You've lost weapons offensively and you've gotten better, right? So it's like, what's the difference here? It's been the defense. Now, one of the things I'll say is the front office hasn't helped. They haven't hit on anything in that defensive backfield, which is atrocious.
That's fair.
They've yet to really replace Terrell Edmonds for the most part. They've been searching for this next big time pass rusher to go with Greg Rousseau for the past 2 to 3 years. They haven't been able to find him. So I can agree from that point, but I think we also have to look at the front office point again. But the reason this win wasn't shocking to me, because knowing what the Ravens are now, who have they really beat? Baltimore, the Jets, Miami, New Orleans, those teams are not good. Even though Baltimore is a name team, but as we've seen the season progress, they're just not a good team. And when they face the team that's on the uptick, New England, they lost. And now you face Atlanta, which is a game that I called. I don't recall if I put on the pod or not, who had the number 1 defense or number 2 defense going into that game. They got beat. So I'm not surprised that they lost because they haven't played anybody the first 4 weeks of the season.
Yeah, it was pretty impressive. Like I said, they got a ton of pressure on Allen. They couldn't really sustain drives in this game. They had some moments. He made some big throws. He always does. But they couldn't really consistently move the ball on this Atlanta defense. And a lot of it just had to do with the pressure. I mean, it felt like those guys were living in the backfield. They couldn't get the run game going. So, yeah. Big win for Atlanta, though. Impressive win. I thought Penix had some great throws. Really, the offense just moved the ball consistently against this Bills defense. And that's kind of what brought up my original point here is just they just couldn't get a stop when they needed one. And then factor that in with the fact that their offense was kind of sputtering. Those are the games where you need your defense to step up and make some plays and get you the ball back, and they just couldn't do it.
We move on real quick. Just goes to Bijan Robinson, along with the 81-yard, as they say, scamper he had. He had a total of 238 yards in totality and a touchdown. That's my game ball for this week.
Game ball goes to Bijan Robinson. Yeah, he was unbelievable, man. He's starting to look like maybe the best running back in the NFL right now. He's been awesome this year. Let's shift to this other Monday Night Football game. That late fumble gave the Bears life, and I got to give them credit. They capitalize there late, get the big game-winning field goal as time expires. Big takeaways for this game for me. Look, I know he had the interception, but for the most part, he was pretty awesome in this game. And Jayden Daniels in year 2, just watching this game and watching some of the plays this guy makes consistently week in and week out when he's healthy, And the key word is healthy, because if he stays healthy, which I do think is a concern, and it goes all the way back to when we were scouting this guy at LSU, because of his build and because he can be a little bit reckless when he runs with the ball, I think staying healthy is going to be obviously huge for him. He's already been banged up this year once, coming off that knee injury. But when he's healthy and he's out there, this is a guy who's going to win multiple MVP awards. I think he's that level of player. And look, I think he's already better than Lamar Jackson. Ooh. Yeah, I said it. This guy throws the ball at an elite level, and he's nearly as dynamic as a runner, but he's already a better passer in just the start of year 2. That first touchdown pass that he had in that game was an absolute dime. He has so much touch, so much accuracy for a guy this young into his career. He's just going to be an unbelievable player. Like I said, as long as he can protect himself out there. My takeaways here on the Bears, they got the win here. They found a way to win. It didn't feel like they should win this game, quite honestly, with all the mistakes. This team just doesn't feel buttoned up to me, Alex. Too many self-inflicted wounds, penalties, drops, special teams errors. It didn't feel like they had any business really being in this game. And to me, that comes back to coaching. And look, I know this is a young first-year coach, Ben Johnson, but he's got to get this cleaned up here, because it's too many times where they really hurt themselves. The defense, they can't get that stop, 3rd and a mile late in the game. It just feels like to me, Chicago still lacks the details that it takes to be a consistent winner right now. But like I said, you got to give them credit there at the end. They find a way to get it done. But yeah, that was my big takeaway in this game. Alex, your thoughts?
I thought there was a big, huge play that Caleb Williams missed from to Roma Dunzier. He just underthrew the ball. Instead of him making the great catch that Travis Hunter made on a similar route that Trevor Lawrence underthrew the ball, he just couldn't hold on to it. But my biggest takeaway, because you kind of echoed some of the things I had. The one thing I'll say is, Roma Dunzier this year is coming into his own, and we're seeing a lot of that elite route running that we saw at Washington. I know you saw me mention that, Brad, in our group chat, that we saw at the Combine, and while he was at Washington, he's coming into his own. And if I was a team that needed a wide receiver, I'd be placing the call to Chicago right now for DJ Moore, because sounds funny, there's too many weapons. Luther Burton, there's not enough passes to get the ball to Cole Kmet, Cortland Loveland, Luther Burton, DJ Moore, Roma Dunzier, and if you want to throw DeAndre Swift in there, they need to move on and get some draft picks to really go and get into that defensive backfield that they have.
We talked about it in the intro. Kansas City, Detroit, this was one of the biggest games over the weekend. Kansas City gets a big win, kind of a statement win for them, because they've been kind of floundering here. This is the first really impressive win of the year. I mean, they had the win over the Giants, so what? They had a win over the Ravens, who are a mess. They looked better in recent weeks, but this is really the first measuring stick game where I looked at them and said, okay, now they're starting to look a lot more like the KC team that we've seen in the past couple of years that has been a consistent contender. Now, Detroit's defense is really banged up, and I actually got to give them some credit, because I actually think their defense held up pretty well at times in this game, considering how many guys they have out. I mean, I think I read there was 5 corners injured in this game. Yeah. They had two safeties that were hobbled. Just a mess back there, but not to take anything away from KC, but obviously like that's tough. You're going up against obviously an elite quarterback. You're going up against some really fast receivers. That's tough when you got so many guys out. There were some key plays that really flipped this game, but Kansas City's defense, I thought, played its game of the year. And not to take away from Mahomes, I think he looked sharp in this game, but I think some of that did account for the fact that the Lions just were outmanned in this game. But the defense stepped up big. That was really the game of the year for them. When you look around the AFC, we talked about a couple weeks ago, there's just not a whole lot of contenders out there that are left. With the Ravens, now the Bills, you kind of have to question how good they are, because we talked about their defense and how they're looking right now. The AFC is looking pretty weak right now. I mean, it's looking like it's wide open for these guys. The Bengals, obviously, Burrow is out for the majority of the year, so you can count them out. It's pretty wide open. And when I watched this game, Andy Reid, I was critical of some of the play calling I'd seen from Andy Reid in recent weeks. And I've talked about, look, this guy's the greatest offensive mind this league has ever seen. But I think he got back in the lab this week, because KC had some great play designs in this one. They had some schemed up plays, some wide open wide receivers, great scheme design. And you know what else I noticed, Alex, was there was more under center formations with big personnel on the field than I have ever seen from the Kansas City Chiefs. They were going into 12 personnel, 13 personnel. when's the last time you saw Mahomes under center that much? And I think it made a big difference in this game versus a physical Detroit Lions team.
Yeah, and I think we saw Noah Gray when you start talking about that big lineup, that second tight end that was on the other side, who also contributed in the pass game. I understand that Detroit was out some corners, for the most part, and then the melee or whatever you want to call it, then that got Brian Branch suspended for the next game. However, Dan Campbell did not stick with the run. He had Jahmyr Gibbs. They were kind of thrashing them a little bit. Now, Kansas City did tighten it up, but that's your identity. Jared Goff is his best off of play action. So you have to continue on with your identity. You should always have more rushes than the pass with that running back crew and that front line led by Penei Sewell. But to your point and to Kansas City credit, Amon-Ra, he did have that one drop on that third down play on that slant that probably would have continued that. We probably, from a momentum standpoint, they probably would have stayed in the game. But they kind of had him bottled up for the most part. He had 10 targets, 9 catches, and only 45 yards. That means as soon as he caught the ball, because he plays in the middle of that field on those drag routes, and then he gets his yak. He's a yak monster. But that means as soon as he caught the ball, they put him on the ground.
Yeah, and that was one of the plays I mentioned when I said there were some key plays that kind of flipped this game. That was one of those plays. Obviously, that first opening drive where the Lions had to settle for a field goal after they had the touchdown that got called back for the penalty. Now, look, it was the right call. But, that was a big moment in that game, it felt like. And you're absolutely right. When the Chiefs offense started clicking, it felt like the Lions panicked a little bit and got away from their identity and tried to play more of a shootout with KC. And that's when they're not playing to their identity, to your point. That's not when they're at their best. They're a run-first team that sets up the big plays off of the run. Look, I want to quickly talk about the Steelers here. Look, they beat the Browns, no big deal. They're kind of expected to win that game. But watching that game, Alex, it got me thinking because I was really kind of iffy about this team through the first several weeks of the season. Steelers are a playoff team. And look, part of that is the AFC North has collapsed, right? We can't really ignore that fact. But this team is going to make the playoffs again, and this is quite frankly the best that Aaron Rodgers looked all year. I was pretty impressed. The offense is balanced. They're running the ball, setting up the passes downfield for Rodgers, setting up that play action game, getting both tight ends involved, and the defense got a bunch of their guys back healthy in this game, and it looked like a completely different defense. Now, I know the Browns' offense isn't good, but they were collapsing the pocket. And look, like I said, the Browns are not good. I get it. But the Browns' defense is good.
Good.
And that Steelers offense moved the ball on those guys. I was pretty impressed. That's the most impressive offensive performance I've seen from Pittsburgh really in a long time, Alex.
Yeah, and I don't really have much in the game, but how about Donnell Washington finally showing up and having a game?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they made it a point in that game to get him involved. They ran a lot of 12 personnel, and they had him and Freiermuth getting involved in the passing game and the play action game. Look, it's time to have a conversation about the Jets. There's no way around it. The Jets are terrible. This is officially a nightmare in New York. Aaron Glenn looks lost. The in-game decisions are terrible. Defense is terrible. And look, I just slammed Sean McDermott a minute ago. That's his side of the ball. Now, I know you're a rookie head coach, but your defense can't be terrible if you're a defensive guy. And quite frankly, this roster is too good for them to be this bad. I'm not saying the Jets were going to be a Super Bowl contender or you got to be competitive. And this team just looks absolutely out of sorts. Look, Justin Fields is terrible. He's been terrible. He doesn't see the field. He doesn't throw on time. He doesn't throw with accuracy. Zero anticipation. I've said it for the last couple of years now. He just hasn't gotten any better. And look, I know he's a good guy. I know he's a hard worker. He's a locker room guy. I get all that. I'm not rooting against the guy, but he's just not good enough. He's not good enough to be a starter in this league. I think they've got to go to Tyrod Taylor, try to salvage whatever is left in this season. You can't keep playing this guy out there. Look, I know the Jets gave this guy a 2-year, $40 million deal, which, wow, what are you doing there? But it's not working. And what was that 2-minute execution at the end of the half? What in the world was that, Alex? I mean, some of the worst time management, in-game decisions I've ever seen, bad coaching, bad quarterback play. I mean, the passing game is hard to watch.
Yeah.
And if it keeps up like this, Aaron Glenn honestly might be a one-and-done coach in New York.
I hate to hear that for one and done coaches period. I think there has to be a grace period where you have to give him another year to see what it is, unless he's Urban Meyer or something like that, then obviously, yeah, get rid of him. But I have to give Aaron Glenn, who played here, he might be in the ring of fame for the Jets as well. Great player for when he was with the Jets. I think you have to give him another year to see where this goes. Obviously, the Titans didn't, but in Aaron Glenn here, you have to give him another year to kind of find, if they need to find a quarterback, because they'll be able to get out of that Justin Fields if they should need to, but find somebody else to come in there and do a lot of things that they need to do. But I would not fire him after a year. It's too early.
Well, look, I'm not rooting for it. It could be heading that way, and we know Woody Johnson has been impatient at times, so it's not looking good. They really need to start showing something, and I'm not even talking about wins. They just need to look more competitive these next couple of weeks, I think. Look, you mentioned it. Let's jump to that real quick here, because Brian Callahan gets fired in Tennessee. Before we get to some more of these games, what are your thoughts on that? Look, I know they were struggling. It was a mess. We just talked about the Jets being a mess. The Titans are a mess too. They've got the number one overall pick. He hasn't looked very good. The team doesn't look very buttoned up. It went off the rails, and then you've got veterans making comments. I don't know if it justifies blowing it up this early in the season, especially with the rookie quarterback. I don't love that, because I think that's really tough on a guy's development. We saw how much that stunted Caleb Williams' development last year with the dysfunction in Chicago. So I don't love that, but what are your thoughts here real quick on Callahan getting let go in Tennessee?
Yeah, I don't like the fact that Brian Callahan, who's an offensive guy, you went and got a quarterback, and the quarterback, from my perspective, looked to be getting better each and every week. Now, if some of his receivers held onto the ball, they probably would have about definitely 1 to 2 more wins and from that side of the ball. However, on the defensive side, we know from Mike Vrabel, this is a tough, hard-nosed team, and you have all these guys led by Jeffrey Simmons up front. They don't look inspired. They look out of sorts. So there was some things to be done on the defensive side, but the offensive side, Ridley looks like he's never going to return to what he was when he had that year in Atlanta. And then I don't know what happened to Tyler Lockett, a guy a few years ago who had no drops. So I don't know what's happening there, but they're not holding on to the ball. They're not helping the rookie out a lot. And the running game is just obsolete compared to where it was last year.
Yeah, and who wants to take that job? I mean, honestly, when you've got an ownership group that's this impatient, who really wants to take that job? Because I heard today on NFL radio, they were talking about Mike McCarthy. And look, I think it'd be a great hire, because you bring in a guy who's a proven veteran guy, an offensive-minded guy with your young quarterback. It makes a lot of sense, but why would he want to take that job? What? So you go on a 6-game losing streak and they fire you? I don't get it. I really don't. It's not the way to run an NFL franchise. Like you said, you got to have some patience. Just like you were saying about Aaron Glenn, we got to give these guys at least some time to develop a culture, to develop a staff, bring in some draft picks, and build a team. I mean, you got to give them some time. So yeah, I didn't like that move, especially with the rookie quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look, let's jump to another game here. Tampa Bay 49ers, this is the big game. Look, it feels like we're going to have to start Baker Mayfield segment in this pod, because every week it feels like we've got to talk about Baker Mayfield and what he's doing here. Look, the Bucs win over San Francisco. 49ers, unfortunately, lose Warner. This guy, in my opinion, he's pound for pound the best linebacker in the NFL.
Agreed.
This guy, and not only that, he was playing at a DPOY level. Just crazy that this Niners team is dealing again with so many injuries again this year. It's really got to be tough to watch if you're a Niners fan. San Francisco, before this injury, they were already leading the NFL in cap money spent on the player reserve list. It's just got to be crazy. Now, look, we both like the 49ers in this game. There was a lot of sharp money coming in as far as the betting side of this on the 49ers, which that tells me, Alex, that the Bucs are still being a little undervalued in the market. But right now, I think the Bucs are the best team in the NFC, and I think Baker Mayfield is the MVP right now in the NFL. And I don't really know how anybody could argue it. And look, they weren't as beat up as the Niners, but they had a lot of guys out too, a lot of key guys out. And here they go and get a big win against it's still a very competitive 49ers team. You know, Buccaneers were clinging to that 1-point lead in the third quarter, facing what looked like a 3rd and forever near midfield. Mayfield escapes, gets out of what would be 2 sacks, shook 2 more defenders in the open field and moves the chains. It seems like every week this guy just makes some kind of highlight play, whether it's his arm or his legs. He might be the funnest quarterback to watch in the NFL right now.
Yeah, I mean, We had we talked about this, and as Baker Mayfield, and what was this? Probably about 3 weeks ago, Brad. We talked about as Baker Mayfield, the MVP no one is talking about. I wish I listened to those words myself and took money on him because he was at a plus 1,000, but now he's at plus 350. Mahomes is number one, Allen is number two, and Baker's number three. And I'm not sure if they consider what happened with Allen tonight, but that's where it stands right now. So he went from 1,000 to plus 350 within 2 weeks. So that tells you all you need to know about what people think about Baker Mayfield and the job he's having. But once again, his toughness, his grit, that team will follow him, and that will win you Super Bowls.
They're going to be a tough out, man, especially with Todd Bowles and that defense, the amount of pressure they get on teams, and then Baker just slinging it around, making big plays. They're a fun team to watch. This was a surprising good game here. LA and Miami, this was a back-and-forth game. This was a game that I didn't really expect to be as good as it was, but man, it was entertaining. Justin Herbert leads a win late. Look, it's starting to go off the rails in Miami. And we talked about it in the offseason, Alex. We talked about the vibe in Miami. We talked about it in the offseason. We said, I don't like the vibe of this team. It didn't feel right going into the season. We didn't like their draft. We didn't like a lot of the roster moves that they made. I think there was question marks about the coach, and it's all come to fruition here. This team is completely off the rails. Now Tua making comments about Miami's locker room and the leadership and just questioning all kinds of – look, Mike McDaniel's going to get fired. I think that is almost certain.
That's inevitable.
He's the next guy to go. And I think Tua might be trying to throw him under the bus here to save himself because he was terrible too in this game. I mean, 3 picks, didn't look good. And then look, on the other side, Herbert, this guy was lights out. Huge game-winning drive. 4 backups on the offensive line, a third-string running back, Quentin Johnston out. He's actually been under pressure more than any quarterback in the NFL this year, and he was making big-time throws, getting peppered in the pocket. This was actually his 18th game-winning drive of his career since he entered the league in 2020. That's tied for second most, only behind Patrick Mahomes. Now, look, I know he hasn't gotten it done in the playoffs. I get that. But this guy has been getting it done late in some big situations. That drive late to break away from the guy, make a huge play to Ladd McConkey to set up the game winner. These guys got drafted back-to-back, and Miami took Tua ahead of Herbert. And I said at the time, I thought it was crazy. I had a way higher grade on Herbert than I did Tua coming out of that draft. Talked about it on this podcast years ago. And so far, it's been absolutely true. And a big part of it was I didn't think Tua just had the physical traits of a guy like Herbert, but I also thought the injury history was real, and it continued into the NFL. When you combine the injury history and just his limitations as a passer, this is exactly why I said you cannot pay this guy. And it is completely backfired in their face. They're going to have to blow this team up because, look, it's broken in Miami. They're going to have to blow it up in the offseason and start over because this thing's a mess. New quarterback, new coach coming. I'm not sure, but it's going to look really different in Miami next season.
And once again, Brian Flores was right if we just go by what we heard that he wanted Justin Herbert. But nonetheless, Manny Vidal, the rookie you were speaking to, 21 touches, 138 yards in total and a touchdown, 6.9 yards. And we didn't talk about this, Brad, but I believe that was last week or a week and a half ago, when Mika Fitzpatrick and a lot of and as well as Mike McDaniel and some other players were talking about Kenneth Grant, a guy that we loved, that I thought was more talented than Mason Graham coming out. However, his motor negated me pushing him up the board, and it seemed to be coming to fruition in Miami as well. But hopefully he can get it on track. But as of right now, dead man walking for Mike McDaniel.
Kenneth Grant's been a huge disappointment. And you're right. There's been a lot of talk about him. The tape doesn't look very good. The effort doesn't look very good at all. My eyes are not lying to me because PFF has him graded as one of the absolute worst defensive tackles in the league right now. I mean, he just is not playing like a first-round pick at all. And I think the effort is clearly the biggest reason why, because we know he's talented. Before we move on real quick, after that game was over, I noticed the first player to go up to Kenneth Grant was Jim Harbaugh, of course, his former coach at Michigan. And you could tell there was almost like a pep talk going on where you could almost see it because I'm sure Harbaugh is aware of what's going on in the media and all the scrutiny around this guy. Being his former coach, you could almost see him trying to pump him up, trying to talk him up, saying, hey, keep your head up, keep working, because he knows how talented this guy is. And if he can put it together, he can be a wrecking ball on that D-line. But unfortunately, it hasn't looked very good so far for them. Real quick, I want to talk about Cowboys, Panthers, because this was a shocking upset here. Or I don't know, maybe it wasn't. Maybe, I mean, let's be honest. Maybe it wasn't that shocking. I don't know. Dak Prescott continues to stay hot.
Yeah,
I mean, this guy is playing at an MVP level. He's not going to sniff the MVP trophy because the Cowboys aren't any good. But this guy is playing at an MVP level. I mean, he's been absolutely red hot. And it's really unfortunate if you're a Cowboys fan because they're going to waste a great season from Dak this year. And it's because this defense is, we talked about it over and over again, they're absolutely terrible. Blown coverages all over the place. Every week, Alex, guys just running wide open. They can't tackle. They can't stop the run. It's just a mess. And look, the Cowboys now rank last in the NFL in defensive EPA and in success rate. So what that means is that not only do they both give up big plays, but they aren't good on a down-to-down basis either. So no matter what metric you look at, they're just terrible. And shout out to Rico Dowdle. Look, he gets the NFL game ball for me, Alex. 239 total yards on 34 touches and his team's big 30-27 over his former team. One of the best revenge games that we have ever seen.
Yeah. And, you know, he wrote a check and then went and cashed that check, if you know about the during the week comments that he made. But yeah, you know, and I have to still give kudos to Dak because this is the Cowboys and he's the mouthpiece. I know Jerry talks, but he's the one that has to write the checks when Jerry talks. And he's been cashing those checks, at least on his side of the ball. But there has to be something said, and I'll say this real quick. There has to be something done about that defense. Justin Simmons, you have two linebackers out there playing safety. Justin Simmons is not playing. He can't be worse than these guys. I'm sorry. He can't be worse than these guys. I don't care. Call him up. Do something.
The personnel is not very good. Let's just start there. But I also don't think Eberflus is calling a very good defense right now because he has these guys playing in a lot of man-to-man coverage when they used to be a zone coverage team, and it is not working right now, especially on the back end. What is working is the Seattle Seahawks. This team's rolling right now, and look, Sam Darnold in Seattle, they win again on the road. This was a spot that I thought might be a letdown spot for Seattle, but looking back, I think I had this completely backwards because this was a perfect letdown spot for the Jaguars coming off of a big win over KC. I should have been looking at this the other way. I was looking at the travel on the road, you know, playing an early game in Florida. I was kind of looking at it like, okay, this could be a spot where maybe Seattle takes an L, but look, it was the Jags who came out flat, didn't come out sharp at all. And look, Seahawks are for real. And Darnold's going to have to prove it in big games down the stretch, and he's going to have to prove it in the playoffs. But, man, he's playing good right now in Seattle. Mike McDonald, I mean, this guy is for real. Jackson Smith and Jigba is for real. John Schneider, what a job this guy has done. And not just recently, just since he's been in Seattle. He's done an unbelievable job. He's a GM that just doesn't get talked about enough. And this, to me, I think was Mike McDonald's best coaching job of the season with a shorthanded defense to go out there and get a big road win against the Jags.
You know what? I don't really have much to say about this game because you're absolutely right. We should have seen this one coming. But at some point down the road, as a bonus, we need to start talking about LSU receivers in the league right now versus the Ohio State receivers. I think we have a conversation. I know Chase and Jefferson are well proven, very top heavy, but it's a fun debate that's been happening around the internet. And I think it's something that we should have. But I want to say before we shift gears, as I know we're not about to, even though this game happened on Thursday, the Philadelphia Eagles, nobody's going to say it. They look like they looked in 2023. I don't care what anybody says. That's exactly how they look. And they got embarrassed by the Giants. And that was a weird loss. And it wasn't just like they lost a close game where they played down. No, they got beat. And Cam Scatterbo beat them up. I don't know. People going to sit there and act like, oh, the Eagles are fine. No, y'all not. Y'all look like 2023. That's what y'all look like. It is what it is.
Yeah, two things. I'll comment on those two things real quick. You're absolutely right. There was nothing fluky about that upset win. The Giants kicked their ass. It was that simple. They beat them in all three phases of the game. They beat them on the lines of scrimmage. They beat them with their quarterback play. They beat them in the running game. They just completely beat Philly. It was sometimes when an underdog wins, there's some fluky plays, some fumbles, a couple tipped interceptions, whatever. None of that was the case. They got completely outplayed. And as far as LSU versus Ohio State, I'll just end it right here. Ohio State has way more big-time wide receivers in the NFL right now, period.
Uh-oh, you're about to start a fight, but we'll talk about it later.
However, LSU has the two top guys. With Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, they've got arguably the number 1A, however you want to rank them.
Look at it, yeah.
They've got the two top guys in the entire sport. So there's something to be said about that. But if you want to talk about depth of receivers as far as just a roster of guys, I don't think it's close. Ohio State's got, 6, 7 guys in the league right now that are just tearing it up. So, yeah, and another rookie this year in Ibuka that just joined that list of guys that looks like a superstar right out the blocks. Speaking of college football, Alex, let's shift gears here. Penn State fires James Franklin. Wow. 15 days ago, 16 days ago? There was a whiteout. ESPN Game Day was there. Top 5 matchup versus Oregon. Huge game. Double overtime thriller. They went from national championship conversation to just a few weeks later, James Franklin is fired. They lose to UCLA. They lose to Northwestern. They did a $56 million buyout, and now they're looking for a new coach. Drew Aller is out for the year, which, look, that sucks, and that's really unfortunate, just on a side note. But what a mess. And look, when I think back to what happened here, my only thought was, I think that Oregon game must have clearly been this team's Super Bowl. And I think they were circling that game all offseason. They had 3 cupcakes before that game. So they knew they were going to put it in cruise control to get to the Oregon game undefeated, and they were going to play basically the Big Ten championship game rematch. And I think they had revenge on their mind. They thought, this is the year, this is the team. We're going to get over the hump. We're going to beat Oregon, and we're going to go on a run for a national title. And I think when Oregon beat them, it was such a crushing loss. I think this team just lost its confidence. I think it must have just felt the weight of never being able to beat the top teams, because that's been the narrative. And look, they hear it. They've got social media. Everybody's got a phone. They know. All those players, all those coaches, they hear it all the time about how they can't beat top teams and blah, blah, blah. Make no mistake, this Penn State team is loaded with NFL talent. Loaded. And they checked out after that loss. There is no way around it. You cannot lose to those two teams the way they did. And I think that's why Penn State was absolutely forced to make this move. There's too much money invested, too much talent. You went and paid some of the best coaches to join this program. Jim Knowles, known as the best defensive coordinator in college football from Ohio State, comes over. This was supposed to be the run. This was it for them. They had so many guys who didn't go into the NFL. They came back for this one specific reason, to make a run at a title. And when they got the gut punch from Oregon, it turned out to actually be a knockout punch. And this program, like I said, they have all the resources, they have all the money, they have all the buy-in for this program to compete at the highest level. They're doing a $700 million stadium renovation right now. They have all the finest meats and cheeses up in Penn State. And right now, this just became the best job opening by far. So let's talk about it real quick. Who are the names? Because there's a lot of names getting thrown around, Alex. Who would be some guys that you're looking at if you're Penn State?
Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure, obviously, at the top of the list, at the top of most people's list, we talked about it, Brad Cignetti. He's probably at the top of, and it's the best job until Florida fires Napier. But anyway, Cignetti is the probably at the top of their list.
Yeah, I think it's got to be Cignetti. We'll talk about that game in a second. Obviously, the Indiana-Oregon game, huge statement win for them. But yeah, this guy's a rock star, and he's going to be at the top of everybody's list because, look, Florida is going to be looking at him. Florida State is most likely going to be looking at him. Penn State, these are all big blue blood programs that are going to be interested in this guy. So it's going to be interesting. I've heard, for the Penn State job specifically, I've heard Matt Rule is a name that a lot of people are talking about because he played at Penn State. I don't know. I mean, he's been okay. I don't know. I mean, if you're firing a guy because all he does is win but not enough, that's going to be tough. Now, look, Lane Kiffin's going to be a guy that they're going to look at. I think PJ Fleck is an under-the-radar guy, Minnesota coach. I think if he had the resources and the money and the buy-in at a school like Penn State, it'd be interesting to see what he could do. Manny Diaz is a name that I keep hearing. Brett Bielema is kind of a hot name because of what we've seen him do at Illinois. But look, there's a couple guys that I have not seen get mentioned, Alex, that I'm going to mention right here that I think need to be in consideration here. What about Eli Drinkowitz out of Missouri? What a great job he's done there. He took that program from near the bottom of the SEC and has made them very, very competitive. And look, they've got good players, but they don't have 5 stars all over the roster like Georgia, like Texas, and some of these other schools in the SEC. Yet he's going toe-to-toe with a lot of these schools. The other name that I think is interesting is Oregon offensive coordinator Will Stein. I think that's a name to watch because he's a guy that everyone's been talking about as one of the bright young offensive minds in the game. If you don't go for the quote-unquote proven guy route and you want to go for the young up-and-coming star, he might be a guy to watch. Speaking of Oregon, Indiana, look, I told you guys last week, I was lucky enough to get press pass credentials for this game. I was on the field for part of the fourth quarter. I was in the press box. What an atmosphere this was. Man, oh man, and what a huge win for Indiana. I don't think there's any doubt about it. This is the biggest win in program history for them. This was huge. This is only the second time they've ever beaten an AP top 5 school. The last time they did it was 1967. They've been a doormat in the Big Ten. And look, Cignetti came in and flipped this thing quickly. They are for real. I am absolutely buying in here because just like we talked about a minute ago with that Giants win, there was nothing fluky about that win at Oregon. On the road, really impressive. The stadium, I'm telling you, Alex, it was insanely loud.
I bet it was.
I think I counted Indiana. I wrote in my notes. I think they had at least 6 false start penalties that I counted in this game. It was deafening. Looking at the Oregon side, I think there was times watching this game where they got a little too east and west. I think they got away from their downhill running game between the tackles. I think that was working. It seemed like they got a little too cute, and it kind of played into Indiana's defense. They had success, but like I said, they kind of got away from it. Look, as far as Oregon, it's a big loss, but I don't think it's in the world. I think this is still a team that can make some noise this year. I think this was supposed to be kind of a small step back year for Oregon. It's a very young team, especially the secondary. This was the first time they looked young. This is the first time where the youth kind of showed up in this game. Dante Moore, first-time starter. This is the first time where he kind of looked a little bit rattled, even at home, which was a little surprising. But I think he really struggled to recognize the pressure. He had some chances to throw it away and took some bad sacks that put them behind the sticks. I think Indiana is absolutely for real. I think Cignetti is an incredible coach. And I was one of those people, I never bought into last year that Indiana was a quote-unquote fluke. I never bought into it. I thought he did an unbelievable job last year. I think he's doing a better job this year. And he flat out coached Dan Lanning in this game. I was surprised at just how prepared they were. I was surprised at how good they were in the trenches. I don't think this program is going away, Alex. They are tough, and they're going to be in the CFP conversation this year. Absolutely.
Well, first and foremost, this is the podcast that told you to take that upset win. That's number one. So we'll take a victory lap on that, even though we got kind of smacked around perhaps in the NFL. But I'll start with my helmet sticker. It went to the Indiana like I gave it to a group last week. I'll give it again to this week. 6 sacks, 2 interceptions by that Indiana defense in hostile territory. It's important in college football, whether you know anything about it or not, and most of you have probably played college football 26, so you know what that means when that controller starts to rattle inside those stadiums. They went into their house and dominated them defensively. So my helmet sticker goes to that defense. And obviously to Cignetti, because you have to have your team prepared to go in these type of hostile environments where you're the underdog, where they say you haven't played anybody and you're this and you're that, and you go in there and not only do you show up, you show out. Kudos to their defense. Cignetti, I kind of like to see those coaches at the little schools kind of get into the college players and do some damage. So I believe he's more than likely going to leave this year. So I hope he continues on this magical ride, because it'll be fun to watch him upset some teams in the college football playoffs.
Yeah, man, that's a great pick. Yeah, that defense only gave up 13 points because we have to remember there was a pick six by Oregon that got that score to 20. But yeah, the defense only giving up 13 to a team in Oregon that was averaging 40 plus. All right, let's shift to I got some notes here in the SEC because I got some eyebrows that are getting raised here, Alex, and I'm going to start with Ole Miss. Are you kidding me, Ole Miss? What in the heck was I watching? So I told you guys I was in the press box. Ole Miss was going on at the same time as this Oregon game, and it was wrapping up, and I'm watching it closely. I've got my iPad so I can kind of see what's going on in college football while watching this Oregon game. And I'm looking at the score going, this is Washington State. Are you kidding me, Ole Miss? Is this a joke? You're in a tight game late in the game versus Washington State. This is not Mike Leach, Washington State. This is not the days of Washington State when they went to the Rose Bowl. This is not, this is not that team. Okay. This isn't even Gardner Minshew's Washington State. Okay. This is the G version of Washington State. Just to put it in perspective, Washington State lost earlier this year to North Texas by 49. and you were in a dogfight on the road to Washington State, Ole Miss. Look, you have no business hanging that number 4 spot next to your name. If I'm the committee, I would have dropped them out of the top 25 just for being in this game. Completely ridiculous. And look, I'm calling out the SEC right now. Look, Ole Miss, they've been propped up by this win over LSU, and quite frankly, LSU has been propped up on a win over Clemson, who we now know is garbage.
Yep.
Tennessee barely beat Arkansas this weekend. They've already fired their coach. They're terrible. That's back-to-back close wins over bottom feeders in the SEC. Who has Tennessee beaten? Where is their win that justifies their ranking, Alex? Am I missing something here? Tell me I'm wrong.
You're not wrong, but I think we all know what's happening with a lot of these schools in the SEC. They get moved up because Tennessee has, Kentucky they should beat, but then they have Oklahoma coming up, and then they have Florida, and then they have Vandy. We know what it is when they come to Florida in the swamp. They don't win, even as trash as we can be at times. They just can't beat us. So I agree that sometimes the SEC may be propped up. It's because we know once you get to those final 4 to 5 weeks, that we're all going to beat each other up. So that's why you get the cupcakes, so they can stay up there. So when they start going against each other and they get knocked and they're knocking each other down, it's a matter of how far they don't get knocked down. But before we move on from that, I have to apologize to PGF Nation because I had Ole Miss. I had taking Washington in the points over Ole Miss. Me and Brad were texting. Brad said, "Do you want me to put that out there?" I said, "Nah," and I didn't, nor did I bet it. But so that's my fault. But we did talk about it, so we should have put that out there. We would have hit again.
Yeah, that was crazy. That would have been the pick of the year, Alex, taking Washington State and the points there. Look, the last couple teams I want to talk about here in the SEC is I got to give some credit to Texas. That was a nice bounce back win for Texas. I was pretty impressed. Defense played well. I thought Arch Manning actually played his best game of the year. Now, the stats aren't going to tell you the whole story. The stat line doesn't look off the charts by any means. But if you watch the tape, he took a step forward in this game. And that's a really good Oklahoma defense. And he made some really nice plays in this game. I think Texas is a team that could go on a run here because you look at their schedule. They've got a little bit more favorable schedule down the stretch here. I think they're going to win some games here and kind of be in the mix. Oklahoma on the other side, their schedule is really tough. Really tough. And I think they're a team that could fade down the stretch. Right now, Alex, I talked about all these teams that I think are being a bit overrated in the SEC. However, I think Alabama and Texas A&M might be the two best teams in the SEC right now. Those are the two teams I've been the most impressed with. Now, I know Alabama had the early loss to Florida State, and that doesn't look great in hindsight. But since that loss, they have really bounced back and looked like a really sharp football team.
Caleb DeBoer, a person that everybody thought by the end of this year was going to be getting fired, if he keeps doing what he's doing and they're getting that college football players, now I wouldn't expect them to win it, but I would expect them to do some damage. He's going to earn himself another year. And I don't know off the top of my head what their recruiting class looks like for next year, but you're talking about Ryan Williams, who will be a junior. Ty Simpson comes back. What they're truly missing is really the running game, which is weird to say after all the guys, whether they make it to the NFL and do something or not, but all those running backs that Alabama was kind of pumping out over the years, for them not to have any type of true running game is odd to say. But if they get one going into next year with a year under their belt with those players, we're looking at a team that should be ranked probably top 5 at least going to next year if they do what we think they're going to continue to do, especially when the SEC championship, like you said, Georgia doesn't look like a powerhouse at all.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Look, before we get out of here, I got to give out my college football helmet sticker this week. Not a game that we got to talk about, but Texas Tech running back Cameron Dickey is going to get the helmet sticker for me. This guy rushed for 263 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 catches, 5 missed tackles, and a big win over Kansas. Don't sleep on Texas Tech, right? I'm telling you, this is the team that's going to come out of the Big 12, and they might upset one of these teams come college football playoff time.
You know what, Brad, before we get out of here, thank you, Michigan, for blowing my first parlay. I took Indiana and I took Michigan in the parlay. Not only could they not get the points, they couldn't even keep the game interesting. this betting thing, man.
Look, I'll tell you, USC was pretty impressive because they out-Michiganed Michigan.
Michigan, yeah.
And that was a game I totally missed on that one. I thought that they were going to have trouble in the trenches against Michigan. I thought they'd have trouble stopping the run. It was the exact opposite because USC looked like the tougher, faster, more physical football team. So that was a big, big win for Lincoln Riley. And then that USC program starting to get things on track there in LA. Look, that's going to do it for today's episode, guys. If you enjoyed the podcast, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Make sure you're following us on social media at PGF Podcast. And check us out at pintglassfootball.com, of course. But once again, I'm Brad Fowler. He's Alex Higdon. This is Pint Glass Football, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Pint Glass Football Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at PGF Podcast.